as the Bitcoin correction continues to move onwards and forwards, this is a very good time to actually be scoping out some of the stronger altcoins to be looking at potential buy opportunities for the long term. With that said, welcome back to EllioTrades channel. I'm your host Krown again today with some sombering TA as I look in the camera with a very atrocious haircut for right now. Apologies on that, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about magic internet money today, so that is the focus of right now. Anyways, before we get into it, I want to once again reiterate my thoughts on this market. Whilst Bitcoin can very easily spend some time below $50,000, I am still long-term macro bullish on Bitcoin with no reason not to be, as long as it is above $42,000 on a weekly closing basis. Also, if you are interested in a daily analysis of Bitcoin and you think that might be valuable, there is a link in the description below to my channel where we do that each and every day, and it's 100% free as well. Okay, cool. Let's jump into it right now. So I want to go over exactly what we spoke about yesterday. We're going to put it on daily over here for Bitcoin, that is. Let me just adjust my window. Beautiful. All right, so same thing basically as before. And this is why I'm very hesitant to jump the gun on yesterday's move up above $50,000. Again, it's just another lower high right now, as it is for this time being, at the gap fill at $52,000 for CME, which was coming in from last Friday closure. And if you're not familiar why this is important or relevant, basically anytime you get a gap up or gap down, which happens after market closing hours for CME, as it does trade on a futures regular exchange basis, meaning that it closes for the weekend and spot price action does not. Well, there is a differential between where it opens back up on Sunday versus where it closes on Friday, creating a gap. In this case, that is what you see right here. There's last Friday, the 3rd of December. And upon filling, which I personally look at as a wick-to-wick fill, typically you do look for a move in the opposite direction, an initial reaction, which is what we have thus far right here. Now, the initial reaction doesn't always have to be a long-term continuation. In fact, more often than not, it's not. However, a lot of people will treat it as such, but I don't think that that's actually very wise in my experience. But it does offer up a pretty damn good pullback area in this case, which is why yesterday I was more on the conservative side. Not necessarily saying that Bitcoin is doomed here, just this is probably unlikely the move for right now. So this is just following up on yesterday. And now let's go into what we're looking at today, which is more or less more of the same. And basically it goes like this. As long as Bitcoin is below $54,000 especially, I am not looking at this as any major threat towards moving back on towards 60,000 plus. However, back above 54,000 bucks, that is where, you know, the boo laws are in control once again. Why? Well, you have the 0.5 Fibonacci retracement right there. Okay, that's interesting. However, the bigger reason is because that is our technical breakdown area coming in from this structural low, basically going all the way back to early October. Very important. So if and when Bitcoin does get above there, that is, you know, all green lights, great stuff. And well, I'd be very happy to see that. However, until then, Bitcoin can very easily fill out the space between there, or actually more accurately said, yesterday's high at $52,000 on that gap fill, and our current low side structure, which short term is 47,000 and change right there at about 250. And if things really get nasty, then all the way down to $45,000 base. Very important, however, as long as Bitcoin's above this red box right here on a closing basis, I'm talking about the bottom end of it, I am long-term bullish. The reason being, we have long-term uptrend on our higher term timeframes, which judge the macro direction. The weekly timeframe for Bitcoin, as far as trend goes, has gotten all macro directions perfectly in Bitcoin's history to date. At some point, that will change to a higher timeframe than that. But for right now, if it ain't broke, don't change it. Okay, so what I want to start off today with is something that is more sombering here. Now, for me, I would be remiss as an analyst and more importantly, a trader, although right now I'm not trading for you. Of course, that would be financial advice. I'm just hoping to shed some light on some interesting things to be aware of within this market, but I would be remiss to not bring this up. So I want to always be thinking against my natural biases. So in this case, I am macro bullish, again, as long as Bitcoin's above about 40 to 42,000 bucks on a weekly closing basis. But there is one major concerning thing here, and this is a chart of Tether dominance. So just like we have a Bitcoin dominance chart and also an Ethereum dominance chart, there is a Tether dominance chart. And at first glance, probably doesn't mean all that much. Now, does it? It's just a general, well, it's a cyan line that generally goes up. Okay, very interesting. We're on a weekly here, by the way. But what I want to show you here is something that I think is worth being aware of. So I'm going to put on a chart of Bitcoin In the background here, represented by the orange line chart, let's actually put this on a log scale. There we go. And I want to briefly talk about this. So we have an inverted relationship here generally between Bitcoin USD and Tether dominance. Now, intuitively, this does make sense in the sense that if Tether dominance is going up, meaning that, Tether is going up in market cap, meaning that presumably more people or just more flows are coming into Tether, then it's likely coming out from, cryptos essentially. It's not going from like other stables to Tether, or it's unlikely going in from, fiat to Tether, although that can be a reason, definitely. But as you can see right here, we do have an inverted relationship, especially starting since, I would say, October 2020. Now, this is not perfectly consistent, and I want to bring up one major counterpoint to this. You do see a nice long area from basically February, March of 2020, all the way up here till September, October of 2020, where they were both going in the same direction, and that being up. So that would be a counterpoint to what I'm saying right now. However, more recently especially, I think that this chart speaks for itself. When Tether goes down on the weekly, we see Bitcoin go up on the macro. When Tether goes up, Bitcoin consolidates and goes down. That was your 60,000 to 30,000 move right there. Doesn't look like much on this price scale, but I'm sure we all know that that was quite a fair bit. More recently, Tether comes down as Bitcoin puts in its lows at 30,000 right here, and Bitcoin goes up to 69,000, new all-time highs. And what's Tether doing right here that is of specific interest? It is putting in a reversal formation, actually. Is this confirmed as of right now? No, it is not. However, if this thing does trade back above about 3.52% dominance, that will be a reversal. And just as an aside here, we do see that this trend line has been more or less, well, very dependable ever since 2018 when this data started to be harvested. So all of these tests down to this region have been essentially major lows. And well, you can certainly say that this one is just about as good of a test as you can get on this area as any. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, although this is, well, it's more of a regression to be fair. So I do want to be aware of that, and I want you to be aware of that as well, because if that does hold to fruition, we could see some continuation of the current downside. Again, I look at price action as most important first and foremost. As long as Bitcoin is again above especially $42,000 on a weekly closing basis, I don't think that this is any major threat of a very serious long-term macro downside move. But below that regions, well, it would be wise to be getting ready for big moves down into the mid, maybe even low $30,000 territory, at least mid 30,000s. Anyways, let's get off that topic right there. And again, I'm only talking about this because you need to be aware of all the different things. It's very silly to blindside yourself to something that is quite literally present. So at the end of the day, I do think that there's plenty of good things going on. Just Bitcoin likely takes its time over here at best. Okay, cool. So let's talk about three of the stronger altcoins. We've been speaking about these tangentially for the most part over time here. And I just kind of want to follow up on them, one of them being Matic. So if and when Bitcoin does put in a low, whether that means that we do come a little bit lower, or whether Bitcoin does bust through the $54,000 critical level, which makes me just basically bullish on all crypto markets, and as everything is pretty much tethered to Bitcoin price action, Matic is one of the ones that I'd certainly be watching right here. Now, we've been looking at Matic for a while. I've made a few videos on this channel about Matic, and we do have our weekly breakout specifically coming in from actually last weekly closing on new all-time highs, in fact. So that does have a technical target decently higher, in fact, somewhere around the low $3-ish regions, with very likely a short-term stop somewhere around, if I actually adjust this properly, at about $2.50, which is what it hit last night. So a pullback around that region is to be expected. I believe that's what we're getting right now. But if you are following the trend and letting it be your friend, as long as Matic is above $2, that would be my invalidation, meaning that if Matic does start to close dailies or even 12 hours below $2, that is where this thing starts to lose its trend. It loses its structure, and gets invalidated on bullish setups. Very likely comes lower over time, back down to maybe like 175 or perhaps lower than that. I'd want to come back to it. No further calls on top of that. Until then, however, still looking pretty damn good here. Again, we do have a technical breakout alongside a weekly volatility expanding and alongside weekly RSI back in the bullish control zone. The last time we saw this was back in January 2021 before a mega move like that. I'm not saying that's going to happen right there, but volatility and momentum were on the same side. So I do look at that as relevant, and this would be an example of one of the strong coins. Here's a counterpoint to this, however. Matic, I believe, I'm told at least, and I don't know if this is true because I don't follow this and I don't trade Matic to begin with, but I'm told that Matic has an event on Thursday, so tomorrow. And a lot of the time when it comes to events and just in trading in general, there's usually a lead up, in this case, a pump up into the event. And then as the event happens, or maybe a day or two later, you typically do see price action, not follow through, usually as a sell the event type of thing. But for right now, this is quite good. As long as invalidations are not hit, I am still long-term bullish on this, I suppose, with technical targets higher, somewhere around the 1.414 medium term, and long term the 1.618, which is 345. Short term more like medium term more like 285 after the short term correction. So we're probably still looking like couple weeks down the road. And where would I look for that that confirmation of short-term continuation, aka a validation condition, full hour closure above 252.5. Until then, short-term corrective here. Okay, cool. Let's move on to everyone's favorite, Ethereum. Again, this one, this one almost didn't even get the memo that the rest of the market was dumping out on Saturday. And fair enough, that's a good sign of strength. So again, we're looking for the strong ones. Matic is a strong one. It's putting in basically new highs. Ethereum salvaging itself within its prior daily range. Beautiful. Now still, in order for this one to validate its range, it needs to trade and close a daily above 45.20. At that point, I'd be looking for a full-on retest of your all-time high at 48.50. Very likely a short-term pullback there, and then continuation up towards our technical target, which I'll just do very briefly right here upon validation, which is going to be, if I do this properly, just kind of eyeballing this one right now, yeah, somewhere around about 5,400 or so, the 2.272 extension over the following weeks upon validation. Upon validation, we do not have validation just yet. Of course, sideways price action here is good for the BULAs, but that does not mean that this thing cannot come back down and grind out the low 4,000 or even 3950-ish region. That is the invalidation, and where things actually do turn around and, well, looking at big moves to the downside after that. So we'll get back to that one if that does happen, but for right now, holding up very, very well, even whilst Bitcoin does play out a bit of a downside short-term move. Okay, momentum oscillators right here. Again, volatility is on the floor. Whenever you see volatility on the floor like that, that is a good sign that this is likely, or this is a major consolidation and leading towards a major effect. A breakout to the top side is likely to be rather impressive, we'll say. And of course, you know, if it does break to the downside, well, it would be equally as impressive. However, for right now, in a better posturing, still putting in higher lows, and that is good. Still, I imagine it takes its time. Anyways. And also the other way to kind of validate a breakout to the upside would just be trading above last week's high, which is 47.81.60. All right, let's move into the last one over here. This one, another big favorite as well, Solana, symbol SOL. And very similar to Ethereum, I got my LARP lines out over here. Please ignore that. Sort of the same sort of interpretation of it. However, you can see that relatively speaking, in comparison to Ethereum, it is not as strong. If it was, it would be somewhere in the median of the range. Right now, it's kind of hanging on to the range lows, but the same interpretation. So 175 is that invalidation area to the downside, which would essentially turn this one out to be short-term, medium-term, and probably a little bit more long-term bearish, with targets down to 155 to 160. Of course, that's well and far away, but do need to be aware of that. By the same token, as long as it's dancing above there, that's fine. That's all good. I expect that this one does consolidate further, as we are seeing volatility still within the more contraction-ish type zone. And I would essentially look at a validation of an upside resolution with targets back onto prior all-time highs at 270 and very likely beyond, with any sort of a daily closure above 230 or just a wick higher than what you saw on the 2nd of December. Again, First things first, within the next few days, maybe a week, I'll be looking for a retest of your prior all-time highs. And then upon validation, after a bit of a short-term consolidation below there, I would be looking for 300 plus within the next few weeks after that. Anyways, that's going to do it for right now. Don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be. Hopefully not wasting too much of your time here. And again, just be aware of what's possible on Bitcoin and just kind of, get the initial thoughts out there very, very simply. Long-term, Bitcoin good, as long as you're above 42. Short-term, well, anywhere between 54 and 47 is fair game. Not really, hasn't really done all that much. Above 54, very good. That is where things do really start to look massively bullish once again. And I'd be looking for Bitcoin to essentially just, well, start its up into the right trend once again. Until then, still corrective. However, long term still intact again, as long as above 42,000 bucks. That's going to do it for today. I want to wish you well. I want to wish you the best. Take care, and I'll see you very soon.